How do I read my books? We'll find out in this video. For those who have been following my channel, you all know I love reading books. It's something that I think is the best form of learning personally for me. And what I wanted to do in this video is share with you the process that I use to read my books. Because the biggest question that gets asked quite often is, I do read books, but I don't know how to remember what I've read. I don't know how to apply what is it that I've read in my own life. And I struggled with that for the longest time as well. And then I think about 4 or 5 years back, I came up with this process that has worked immensely well for me. And that's what I want to share with you. First, a few things. One, I only read nonfiction. I've never read fiction. In fact, I think the last fiction I read was The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And I think that was such a powerful book that was almost like, I don't want to read fiction again. I have nothing against fiction. It's just that it doesn't appeal to me. So a lot of what I'm going to discuss is applicable only to nonfiction because it is driven by the fact that whatever it is that I'm reading, I want to apply some of that to my life, make a change, make some difference in how I live. And that is why there will be a few nuances which will only be specific to nonfiction. Second, I only start reading a book on a digital format. I use a Kindle. In fact, I want to give away a Kindle as a giveaway for this video. So in case you're interested in receiving a Kindle from my side, continue watching the video because at some point of time, I will tell you how can you get yours for free. So I read my books on a Kindle and I love that because a Kindle is a really powerful device. It allows you to highlight, bookmark, all the things that you can also do in a book, but it makes it very easily to search for what you've highlighted or bookmarked and extract that, which is a very important component of how I read my books, and that's why I start reading it digitally. I do eventually buy books in a physical format, but I'll tell you which are the books that I buy because most I don't. So I read every day. I read about 30 to 45 minutes every day. This is right in the start. So when I get up, after I've meditated, the next thing that I do is I read. And those 30 to 45 minutes are mostly either on my sofa or on my bed. I'm not so particular about the posture that I read in. I do follow a very strict discipline after I've read the book, and I'll tell you what that is. But while reading, it is just about comfort. I don't read in the night. I don't read before I go to bed because and this is personal, I just feel that books that help me sleep better are not the kind of books that I want to read. I want to read books that activate me, that genuinely get me to think. And that's why nonfiction. And that's why reading early in the morning. Because when I'm reading early in the morning, I'm active, I'm ready to get things done. So I want to be provoked. I want to be challenged. I want to be reading something that maybe just throws at me something that I have never believed in or thought was never to be true. And now it's forcing me to think in a different way. So that's why I really like reading right in the morning, not towards the end of the day. When I'm reading, I skim a lot. So I'm not one of those who reads every single word and every single sentence. I don't. I skim a lot. I'm skimming through sentences. I'm skimming through even pages. Because here's the truth about nonfiction. Most of them should not have been books. They should have been blog posts at best. And that means that the book becomes repetitive. The book is just reinforcing the same thing, which is important, by the way. But if you've got it, then you just want to quickly move. So I'm a fast reader by that sense, and not because I'm reading fast, but because I'm jumping words. This has come after years of practice. So I wouldn't recommend you to start skimming if you are just starting how to read. Just start by being as slow as it takes, being just as thoughtful as it needs to be, and enjoy the process. That's the key thing. You have to enjoy the process and whatever works for you. By the same logic though, and this was a big change that I made 4 or 5 years back, I don't finish all my books. I don't finish the books that I start in case it doesn't interest me. I, in fact, today believe that it is as much a book's responsibility to earn my attention as it is my responsibility to give the book its attention. And that is why it's a give and take. If a book in the early stages or somewhere in the middle is just losing my attention and is just becoming repetitive or not becoming as gripping as it should be in its storytelling, I'm like, I'll give it one chance, but after that, I'll just leave the book. I know it took me forever to read Autobiography of a Yogi because it is an intensely deep book and a difficult one at that. But I was okay. I think that's my most quit book, if there is some title like that I can give it. I have quit that book almost 5, 6, 7 times, which is I start reading it and this time I'm determined that I will, and then at some point of time, it's like, you know what, not happening. And it took me almost 7 or 8 times to finish that book. I'm glad that I did, because it's a great book. But as I said, I didn't put the pressure on myself to finish the book just because I started. And that's an important distinction of how I read my books. While I'm reading, and because I'm reading digitally, I'm highlighting like crazy. Any sentence that strikes me, any thought that strikes me, any story that strikes me, anything at all that captivates me, I'm highlighting it. It's very easy to highlight it on Kindle. You use your finger to do that, so it becomes supremely easy. And once I finish the book, or even if I leave it midway, whatever is it that I've highlighted, Kindle has this really powerful feature of exporting the highlights in a PDF and emailing it to an address. And that is brilliant, because at that point of time, I export all the highlights, convert that into a PDF, and send it to my mail address. And then the next day, I sit, and this is when I sit in a disciplined fashion. This is work. So this is scheduled during my work hours. Well, my work is slightly in my control, and that's why I can afford to do so. If you are working in a job, then you will have to set time aside, which is reading, and that's capturing all these thoughts, and then reflecting, which is an equally important and perhaps the most important part of reading a book. So I then sit down on a table in a proper professional manner as if it's work. I have the PDF in front of me on a laptop or an iPad or whatever. And for each of the PDFs, I now make a note of how can I apply this in my life. It could be anything. It could be a story that was shared, and how can I convert that maybe into a video that I share with all of you. It is a thought that provokes me and I want to see how I want to experiment with it or maybe do something about it. It could be a great idea that I can apply in my startup, in perhaps something else in life. Whatever is it, I will force myself to think of where can this sentence, story, paragraph be used in my life. And that is a first level draft that I make for myself. When I write it, my brain registers that to be important. I've spoken about this quite actively. When you write something, you are telling your brain this is important. And that is a great way for you to retain something more than just by reading it. So that's the first level of retention. I then come back to these notes a month afterwards. I would have made some changes, maybe made some promises, maybe made some commitments, maybe just done something differently from what I used to in the past. And after a month, I see which of these still stayed, which of these have brought about a change, as early as that change may be, which of these just fell through, so they didn't really make any difference, or perhaps I got bored of it, or perhaps I just realized, you know what, it doesn't work for me, whatever the case may be. So I'm not being harsh on myself, I'm not putting any pressure of it making work, I just am asking, where am I in this journey? And that's the second level of retention. At that point of time, if I feel that this book has really made a big difference in my life, and I feel that there is a lot more that I can perhaps learn from this book, because this was a first level glance slice. I was skimming through it, maybe I was skipping some chapters, some pages, and even despite that, whatever highlights I made, they brought about some meaningful change in my thought, in the way that I look at life or the way that I go about it. So I was like, great, I'll buy a physical copy of that book. And that is when I buy a physical copy of the book. And it goes into my reread list. So I maintain a reread list. And those are books that I keep reading every now and then, at least once every year. And those books just form part of my arms and ammunition to continuously keep challenging myself or learning something new about my own self or about the world. And I have come to believe that there are millions of books in the world, and you possibly can't read all of them. but there are only few that apply very strongly to you. And if you were to consistently and continuously read those books every now and then, you will learn a lot more than to just keep reading newer books and not retaining anything out of them. So that is my simple journey of going through how I read a book. As you would imagine, it has this reading part to it, which is habitual. All of us commit to it, but this equally important, if not more, retention part of it. And that's like work. That's serious business. And until I didn't do that, whatever is it that I was reading, I was unable to conclude whether I was really applying it in my life, or in fact, I was even retaining what I was reading in the first place or not. And it's only once I started writing, only once I started forcing myself to ask this question, how does this one thing apply to my life, did it make a material big difference. As I said, as part of this video, I want to give away a fresh brand new Kindle, and how to get that is coming up shortly. So a few other things that I do when I read books. One, I don't listen to books. I'm not a big fan of audiobooks. I read my books. And it's because there is a pecking order of learning. We can learn from watching, we can learn from listening, we can learn from reading, and we can learn from doing, and we can learn from writing. And these 5 ways of learning have very different learning patterns for everyone. So you would figure that maybe you are a terrific learner and you absorb things really very well when you hear them. Not the case with me. I absorb things really well if I read them and I write them. And that's why I double down on these 2 activities. So for me, hearing does not help. For me, hearing is a passive commitment. When I'm committing anything passively, it's not as impactful as getting it done actively. So if I'm listening to an audiobook and I'm also checking my mails or maybe writing something else and so on, that other activity is becoming more important. The listening is just going into some subconscious, and it becomes really hard for me to dig into that subconscious and pull out the best extracts. So I don't. I also don't read multiple books at the same time. I devote myself to one book and I read that. Thankfully, because I skim and I have the daily practice of reading, I'm able to read about a book a week, because most books are between the 4 to 5 hour range, and over 7 days, I get about 4 to 4.5 hours of reading. And with the skimming, I'm able to finish most books in that time. There are some books that take longer, and I'm totally okay with that. I'm absolutely fine with the book taking more than a week. I am not responding to anyone. I'm not setting some world record. I'm not setting some output or goal or target of reading X books in a year. None. I've just committed myself to the habit of reading, and I thoroughly enjoy that. The only big difference that I've done is what this video is about, making a proper process of how do I go about reading the book. Now that you know how I read my books, I would love you to start that journey as well. Now, you could be someone who's already read or already has the habit of reading. You could be someone who has never read or perhaps does not have the habit of reading. Someone who's finding that out about yourself. Whatever the case may be, I think a Kindle is a great start to read books. This is not a sponsored post. I just love the product. So I'm more than happy to give one Kindle away to all of you. And the way that you do that is right now in the comment section. Tell me who you are, at what stage of reading are you, and how would a Kindle change that for you? Who you are, at what stage of reading are you, and how would a Kindle change that for you? I'll pick up one lucky winner amongst all the comments after 2 weeks of this video, and that lucky winner will get a brand new Kindle Paperwhite from me, freshly ordered from Amazon, delivered to your doorstep. I hope you had some encouraging thoughts about reading come through this video. More importantly, could think about the process that you could follow now when you read books. And I hope that this was useful. Ankur Warikoo, signing off.
अभी के अभी इस चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करिए ताकि अगर कोई भी नया वीडियो आए आपको उसके बारे में पता चले।